Good day and welcome to Matt Talks Back, episode number 4 today. And we've actually got a very special guest joining us, somebody that you probably know. John Brink of Brink Forest Products and Brink Group of Companies is joining us on the show today. He's got a 55-year career here in Canada, and his story is a pretty crazy one. It's one of my favorite stories of success throughout northern BC. And today we're going to find out exactly what makes the man tick and how he came to Canada with $27 in his pocket and somehow built an empire. John, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's just start right at the beginning here. You grew up in Holland. What was your childhood like over there?
I was born in Holland on November the 1st, 1940, at the beginning of the Second World War. And when the Second World War ended, it was in our little town. We were liberated by the Canadians, April the 12th, 1945.
So you were there when you were liberated by the Canadians. You were alive. You were rocking. What was that like?
Well, I was only 5 years old, but I remember it well. Obviously, it was rough going during the war, and from what I remember, when I was about 3, slightly after 3, I still remember even now bombers overhead. We were under one of the main bomber routes into the German targets, and we would have day and nighttime bombing after 1943. As many as 300 planes in the air on the way to Germany, and then coming back. And either, but not in formation necessarily, but we would see planes being shot down, and in the distance, we were about 10-15 minutes from the border of Germany. We could see in the distance targets burning, and so it was tense times. A lot of times when we were outside with my mother, my dad was drafted into the Dutch army, and the last time that they saw him was in Rotterdam before it got bombed. And for 5 years we would not see him at all and did not know if he was dead or alive. My mom had 3 siblings. I was the youngest. My sister was 1 year older and a brother 2 years older than me, and so times were pretty rough. But and in particular the winter 1944-45, which was known as the Hunger Winter,
right.
Thousands of people died, and so things were pretty rough by the time the Canadians liberated us.
How did do you remember how your mom dealt with that kind of thing? Do you remember anything that she said to you during those times to keep you guys calm or anything like that? It just seems like such a different world to us today when we haven't dealt with anything like that in many, many years, especially here in Canada. So how did she deal with that, especially with your siblings and you being so young?
Yeah, obviously it was very, very tough and very, very difficult. And a lot of times now what I do, Matt, probably for the last 10, 15, 16 years, on November the 11th, I get an opportunity to speak to schools about that, both in northern BC and in the lower mainland. Virtually every year I speak to at least 2 or 3 different ones, and to just share with them how fortunate we are to live here, and then kind of paint them a picture, not in the gruely details of it sometimes, but more or less how quickly things can change, and why do we have 2 minutes of silence to remember those that gave the ultimate price, and show them a picture really, as we are living here and all the things around us in this beautiful, beautiful province, in this beautiful country, how quickly things can change, and not to take that for granted. And obviously what happened there overnight, all but was normal changed, and the one parent was no longer there, and we were in occupation, and there was always a sense of anxiety right up to the end of the war.
Wow.
Really. And yeah.
Wow. Did the soldiers end up marching right through your hometown?
Oh yeah, very much so. On the German soldiers coming in, they called it a blitzkrieg,
Right.
overran Holland very, very quickly. and there was not much of a resistance because obviously the Dutch army was not measuring up to the German forces, but it didn't quite go quick enough as far as the leadership in Germany decided, and to hurry the process, they decided to bomb Rotterdam. And Rotterdam is one of the largest cities in Holland. It's one of the biggest harbor cities in the world, but the whole downtown of Rotterdam was destroyed.
Wow.
And it were difficult times.
That's crazy. Okay, so the war ends. You're liberated by Canada. What happened after that? What set you on your path to forestry?
Well, it likely started in, at the Liberation, and right behind our house was a schoolyard, and we as kids, the obviously were very, very impressed by all the soldiers and all the things that were going on with the Liberation and the Canadian forces in particular. Right behind our house was a schoolyard, and there was a small section of the Canadian Red Cross. And we would go there at daybreak, and they would feed us bread, with butter and cheese, and the cheese and the butter was bigger than the bread, and everybody was called Johnny, and although we couldn't communicate, we did, right?
Right.
And so we were very, very impressed by that, and and right from that moment forward, I always knew at 5 years old that I wanted to go to Canada, the land of my heroes, and it was not if, but when. And so that's kind of where the dream was formed. On the other part, but much later then, my grandfather, although I didn't know him, he died very young at about 40 years old. He was a master carpenter, and I knew him through all the work that he did, and very specialty work, churches, insides of churches and cabinets that were manufactured by him. Right. As a tradesman. And then my dad worked in the lumber industry, but in Holland we don't have much of a forest. I think we got altogether about 155 trees. No, I'm just kidding. But, most of the lumber there, the rough lumber, is imported from mainly Sweden, Central Europe, Russia, and then further remanufactured into other products. So, and he managed a smaller company like that did a lot of that. And so between my grandfather and my dad, the European way is you kind of follow the careers of your parents or grandparents, and there is usually a connection. So I wasn't much into the formal training or education process, so I wanted to work with my hands, and so I became a furniture maker. Okay. And then from there on in, worked in a lumber company, and then, but still the dream was there to go to Canada, and I wanted to come to Canada when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me, too young, and then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years, special forces. Actually, I was hoping to fly, but they put me into special forces. I don't know why, because I had a brown belt in judo. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know. So, but anyway, good training period, and so I did that, and then after I came out of the Air Force, I worked for the largest lumber importer in Western Europe, a company by the name of William Pond. Ended up fairly quickly into their auditing team and troubleshooting team. They had about 35 smaller companies all around Holland, and some in Germany, some in Belgium, and I was on their team for about 2 years. Became an assistant manager of another mill, and then I had this dream about going to Canada, and then obviously by then I was well attached to the lumber side. Every time I would do something within the larger company, because my dad managed a smaller company for them, they said, "Oh, this is the son of Brink," So and I wanted to become me, and I wanted to start from the bottom. So I made up my mind, went to the Canadian Embassy in Den Haag in Holland, applied to emigrate. I wanted to get out as quickly as I could in the next 4 weeks, and then start with leaving Holland with $150, no connections. I wanted to start from the bottom. no connections, one suitcase, one set of clothes, 3 books, $150. I left Schiphol. And I knew I would never take another dollar out of Holland or anything. And so I knew only that I wanted to go to British Columbia because that's where all the trees are, and I wanted to build my own sawmill. That was dream number 2.
Gotcha.
And so by the time I landed in Montreal and took the train across Canada from Montreal to Vancouver.
What was that train? I got to take you off a little side story here. What was a train ride across Canada in 1965 like?
Long and slow.
I bet.
Compared to Europe, I was, used to these high-speed trains, and a lot of times the train in Canada, I kind of felt like walking alongside of it, as it was not quite, but much slower than I was used to. And then the other part, the amazing, this amazing, major, massive country, going across the prairies and then into the Rockies and then and absolutely amazing. But there was a sense of anxiety because I didn't speak the language, I didn't know a soul, I didn't have a job, and so then when I arrived in Vancouver, I went to the immigration office there, and there was a German fellow that could speak German. I could speak some German, so I talked to him, explained to him what I was planning to do. He said, "Go to Prince George." This was end of July 1965, and so I stayed in a hotel the night, and then in the morning there was a Greyhound bus. The hotel that I stayed at the night was $2 a night,
right?
And which was quite a bit of money because I had limited resources, and so then I took the Greyhound bus after about 12 hours, landed in Prince George. I forget where the Greyhound station was then, at 4th or 5th Avenue, right next to that new building from UNBC.
Right.
And I always look at it when I go there. I came off the bus there with my suitcase, and then I counted my money 2 times, 3 times, and I had exactly $25.47. and so that's what I had. And then I walked to the post office, and above the post office, then BID has that building now. I'm not even sure if the post office is still there. It could be. In any event, so there was an immigration office on top. Fortunately, again, there was a fellow working the summer job, and he had a Dutch background, so I could interact with him. And so I was looking for a job, and this was on a Thursday at about late morning, and he tried to find something for me. He said, "When do you want to start?" I said, "Tonight." Obviously I had pastoral issues, and so he found something for me in Quesnel.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, it's just like Europe. Every 20 minutes there is a bus. No, not so. I had to find so now I was dressed. I had gray pants, double-breasted jacket, white shirt, tie, and a small 3/4 length raincoat with my suitcase. And then so I walked to Highway 97 and hitchhiked. Somebody, this guy is strange. And so the guy that picked me up, it took a while, but then finally a guy to pick me up, he said something like, "Where do you want to go?" Well, I couldn't speak language, so I said Greyhound Station, because that's all I knew, because that's where we stopped on the way through.
Right.
And so they had found me a job at Wellwood of Canada in Quesnel, and to start piling lumber that evening at something like 6 o'clock or so. So I arrived in Quesnel, called the HR manager. Ernie McKettrick was his name. It took me 30 years to visit him and say, "I need to thank you for helping me when I came." And so 30 years later, I should have done it, but that's how things go. But at least I thanked him for helping me.
No doubt.
So he found me a place for board and room, and then I had to that evening go to work, and I walked all the way to Wellwood of Canada. That took me an hour and a half, and I went there with my gray pants, double-breasted jacket, white shirt, tie, and my raincoat. And so then they put me at the end of the green chain, and that's where I started piling lumber. Now, it was not just a little sawmill that employed about 20 people. There was also a plywood plant that probably employed about 130 or so.
Yeah.
I bet you all 150 people came look at this strange guy on the chain piling lumber. And so I said, I took my coat off, my raincoat initially, and then my jacket, then my tie, and then I piled lumber, for the rest of the shift, and then walked back, and then I did that for about 30 days, and then somebody offered me a job in Prince George
Right.
at a new mill that started here in the BCR side, one of the largest mills in Prince George.
Mm-hmm. Unreal. Okay, now you were in Watson Lake for a while too. Is that right, up in the Yukon? Where did that fit in?
I was. So let me just pick up and again. So I got my job
Okay.
at the mill in Cornell in Prince George. And by pure coincidence, the mill was called Netherlands Overseas. Although I didn't know anybody there, and they had no particular connection. The owner, who I never met until much later, had a Dutch background, and that's how he called it. So I got a job there. They kind of promised me a job, and then it didn't really happen. And he said, "Well, I'll come back tomorrow. I'll come back tomorrow." So in the meantime, I was waiting for my check, in my last check from Wellwood of Canada, and because of my difficulty to speak the language, I had both meant the Bank of Montreal, and I had meant general delivery to the post office. So I walked for the next week and a half every day back to town to check at general delivery if my check had come in, and then walk back to the mill because there was maybe an opportunity to get a job.
Right.
So then I became worried about, I became weak because I had no more money, and I slept. I always died by the hospital where the old entrance used to be, in the emergency entrance. It's in the front of the hospital, not at the end, but it is now. And I kind of slept there under a tree,
Oh, no.
just because I was starting to become dizzy sometimes, and I thought if I'm close to the hospital, then I can do it. And in the morning I would get up and then walk back to Netherlands Overseas, look for a job, and so then on the weekend I hitchhiked back to Cornell, and the landlady there that helped me, when she saw me, she said, "Oh my gosh, coming in." And so I had a bath, and I got kind of cleaned up, and then I told her that my paycheck hadn't come, and she called Ernie McKettrick over the weekend, who then called the payroll clerk, and they said, "We send it to the Bank of Montreal." So and it was $167,
Yeah.
for 80 hours of work. I was the richest guy in the world.
Yeah.
I had no money in the camera, so I went back, hitchhiked back to Prince George, and found a place on Queensway, so that made my walk back to Netherlands Overseas shorter. And then I decided, if they don't give me a job, I'll just start cleaning up, and that's what I did. I started as a cleaner man that was not on the payroll. Then pretty soon they would be short-handed, and they said, "Why don't you get the strange guy that is cleaning up?" And then before you know it, I got promoted to a cleaner man. Then it became a lumber piler, then green chain foreman. Then I became back-end foreman in the mill, and then Netherlands got into trouble. They had a receiver in there, and I became superintendent. All of that was in the time of 1.5 years, the largest mill in the Prince George region. That didn't go fast enough for me because I wanted to get my sawmill, so I got an opportunity to go to Watson Lake, Yukon, to become general manager of Watson Lake Lumber.
Okay. Wow. And so, it's funny that story of hard work seems to be one that just repeats itself over and over again in the forest industry. I have another friend, Nelson Malcolm, who actually works for Carrier, and he did the exact same thing. He just wanted a job in forestry. He was persistent. He showed up every day at 6 a.m., sat at the door with his work boots and his lunchbox until one day somebody didn't show up. And the boss walked out and said, "Who's this guy?" "He's been here all week. He shows up, hangs out for 2 hours, and then he goes home." And he's like, "Well, kid, it's your lucky day. You get out on the line. And if you do okay, we're going to keep you going." And here he is, 35 years later, and now he's, managing Carrier Lumber type things. So it's just a hardworking, persistent type of a job.
And then the other part about it, Matt, is get noticed.
Yes.
And the way to do that is be, so my motto is attitude, passion, work ethic. Combine those, it results in success.
Yeah.
And I do that every day of the week. Even now, this morning I got up, I think it was about 4:45 or something. And that's when I get up. The other thing that I always do is I always make my bed.
Yep.
Always. And it's just a way of life of doing things. That kind of, I look back when I leave, it's complete, then I go on with my job. And I'm always in the hurry, and I'm always, I love my job no matter what I do.
Right. Right. That's important. If you
And
don't
then
love your job, it's going to wear on you eventually. Yeah.
and then you get noticed. And if you get noticed, then you perform, and then success will follow.
Gotcha. So you made your way up to Watson Lake. You found some success there because actually Scott sent me a few pictures from your archives, and I saw a couple of you hanging around a Corvette. So success must have come along in Watson Lake for you.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the Corvette came from. I bought it in 1983. I
Oh,
think
okay.
so, but after. But in any event, Watson Lake was interesting because I was still single at the time. I was staying at Watson Lake Hotel. Sorry, at the signpost. It was called Jack and Mac Hotel,
Right.
Motel, and then from there and then I managed Watson Lake Lumber, and I did that for about 3 years. I had a contract with them and an option to purchase 1/3 of the mill, and then I ended up buying the motel.
Right.
And I had the motel for a period of time, about 4 or 5 years, build it up. And the whole idea around the motel was not to run a motel, but the whole idea was that in order for me to build my own sawmill or buy the people that I was managing out, I had to make money.
Right.
And so then after 5 years in 1972, really. My first daughter was born, and then I sold out in Watson Lake and came back to Canada.
Right. Okay. So now you're a pioneer too, you're a pioneer because of necessity. You came back to Prince George. You had a mill, but I believe it was your source material started to run out. So you decided to switch things up and bring finger jointing into Canada. Now, for people that don't understand what finger jointing is all about, can you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, basically, what you're referring to is, something that obviously because of my background in lumber and being trained as a furniture maker and having been involved in further manufacturing in Europe, I had exposure to a number of different practices that included finger jointing, as well as the other, what they now refer to as mass timber, cross-laminated timber, all of those things. The further manufacturing was something that I was quite familiar with, still am today. So
that was the standard. That was the standard in Holland before you came to Canada. That was something they were already doing.
They were already doing it in certain applications, mainly in window frames, but not too much in dimension lumber.
Gotcha.
And so that was the finger joining part. They did cross-laminating timber in certain applications. They were doing much more in further manufacturing than we would be used to here.
Gotcha.
So subsequently, when still having my dream of building my own mill, then I came back from Watson Lake. I kind of had to start from the beginning again. I went back to Netherlands Overseas, actually. I worked for them again as a supervisor. From there on in, I became a cost accountant there and a sales manager. And then in 1974, I started working on my business plan that would become Brink Forest Products. And then incorporated that company in 1975, and then started operating in October 1975. Now, the concept was in terms of access to fiber. I couldn't go out and timber is mainly all allocated already in the province,
right,
and in the interior. So I had to find a different source of fiber and then try to find a product that was unique and that I could manufacture into the marketplace. So one of the things that I became very quickly familiar with as I worked in the industry here, that the lower quality lumber was either going into chippers or it was sold as rejects or economy grade. So I focused on that area. That means a piece of lumber had a defect of some sort that didn't make it suitable for structural lumber
Right.
in whatever application. So I focused on that, remanufactured that particular type of lumber, tried to take out other products, and then the byproducts of it were a lot of short pieces.
Right.
And for the short pieces, there was really no market until I introduced finger jointing in Canada. For all intents and purposes, finger jointing is where you glue pieces together. So as you have the lumber like that, you cut fingers at the end, lay a layer of glue in there, then push it together and to make it a solid piece, any length that you want. That's what I kind of focused on. We put that together. I operated the first finger jointer in Canada, 1975, and then from there, obviously, now there are a lot more finger jointers around North America, more in Canada, but it developed an industry. We are
Okay.
by far the largest one in Canada that is doing it, and we're still growing in that area. We likely will double our volume in the next 2 to 3 years.
That makes sense then. So I actually, I'm a regular hiker here in Prince George, and I love those heritage river trails that go right in behind your property there. So when I go back there, you look through the fence, and I notice that you have a big covered area, and it's got a whole bunch of short little boards. They're all about this long, about this wide. So that's your source. Right, and then you're finger jointing everything together. I gotcha. Okay, very interesting. So, 1975, I mean, it wasn't always an easy go for you. Did the city make it relatively easy to get this business started and to really start being a pioneer in the industry, or did you have to go through a few fights here and there?
Well, it's never easy, but I have no particular complaints about the city of Prince George. I love the city of Prince George. They've gone through a lot of ups and downs as well with the forest industry and other industry. But by and large, when I came here, Prince George was a boom town. The normal question was when I came in the mid '60s is, when did you get here and when are you leaving? Obviously, we've come a long, long, long way from that 55 years ago. We now, if I look around, we at the University of Northern British Columbia, CNC, an amazing place to raise a family. So that came a long way, and and I salute the city and compliment them for all the things they have done. In terms of building a new business in entrepreneurship, and I talk to a lot of groups about that, aspiring entrepreneurs and other people as to how do you do that, how do you go about it, especially when you don't have much money or no money at all. So when I first prepared my business plan, and the amazing thing about that, Matt, is that I still have my business plan that I prepared in 1975 today. And I've had a lot of people, I'm in the process of writing a book, and in that process, a lot of my team has been looking at my ex-business plan, or my current business plan for all that matters, and saying, amazing what it still looks like from when I started.
It matches up.
And so what I say, prepare a good plan, then what I would do is take my business plan, drop it off at every bank in town, try to find partners that were interested in investing. Most of them weren't, or none of them were, simply because it's such a challenge to build a forest company from the ground up. And then, so I had to do it on my own. So I dropped off my business plan on every bank in town, got turned down by every one of them, and then kept going back, modifying my business plan over and over again. Then, focused a bit on BDC as well as the bank of the Royal Bank, and so with the Royal, after about the 12th time I was there, and every time modifying and not wanting to push too hard, the bank, the fellow that was looking at my potential proposal, one of the account managers, said, okay, this was the 12th time. So he said, okay, let me talk to John Weems, who is still around,
Right.
John Weems.
Yep.
Let me talk to John Weems, who is the manager. But then all the people were in the same main area, the lower main area. So there were cubicles in the row, and John Weems was in the far corner. And so he went down there again with my proposal. And what was I looking for to start my forest company? $25,000. And I can still hear today, from 6 cubicles away, He said, "Give him the money, give him the money." So that's what Brink was like. 3
Uh,
employees, and and from there and then, I actually my book is coming out in September.
oh, cool.
This year September, yeah, and so but it shows the ups and downs that go with it. I started the company over again 4 or 5 times from the bottom up because of changes in the industry, not because we went bankrupt. We have always been solid. Today we employ close to 400 people, and we are pretty much the largest secondary manufacturing company in British Columbia, and we are poised to grow in the next couple of years, probably again to at least double from where we are today.
It's a great success story. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Prince George because I know you're very passionate about this area, much like I am as well. 1975, that would have been around the time that Mr. Ben Ginter was doing his thing over at Pacific Western Brewery, which at the time was called Tartan Brewery. Did you have many run-ins with Ben Ginter during your early days here in Prince George?
Not really, Matt, other than very briefly saying hi, but socially I did not know him.
Right.
And then, if you would have been me at that point, sitting here at the location where we are today, I'm speaking to you from our operation at River Road,
Right.
where I started the company 45 years ago. If you would have seen me then, and there are pictures in my book about all of that, is that, again, I would sleep fast about 6, 7 hours a night, and the rest of the time, the other 17 hours or 16 hours, I was working 7 days a week to bring this operation off the ground. So, and I was greased from top to bottom. There's virtually the blue buildings that we have. There's not a nut or a bolt in the building I didn't touch.
Right.
And so that's what I did pretty much the first 20 years.
Right. You're working. There was no time for socializing. You were a working man. Actually, as we're chatting here, I'm actually just flipping through some of the photos that Scott had sent me as well. There's an early one here of what looks like you guys building a beehive burner. Would that have been over on River Road?
Yeah. It was but I was trying to do, I've always been looking at new technology to make it more environmentally friendly. And so we were experimenting with a refractory burner, that is special refractory material that we had developed that would create high heat and no exhaust smoke. So the fire burns at a very high rate, high temperature rate, and so we operated that for a number of years. Now we don't at all, obviously, but then we did. Yeah.
That beehive, is that the beehive burner that's in the Railway and Forestry Museum? Is that the same one?
No, this
No.
was
Okay.
refractory of elements. No.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, now I did want to ask you about a couple other people around the Prince George area, just because of your long time in the Prince George area here. During your early days as well, legendary Prince George Mayor Harold Moffat would have been in power at City Hall as well. You probably had some dealings with Harold with your business, I would guess, right?
Oh yeah, we did, and then I knew him, as owner, managing Northern Hardware, obviously, and for all this time. And Harold was smart. He was bright, and he was a no-nonsense individual, right? So quite a character.
Yeah.
And that's kind of already where the motto developed, that if Northern Hardware doesn't have it, you don't need it.
That's right. And that was true for over 100 years over there, too, right through my life up until they closed this year. Yeah.
Exactly.
So 8 years into your time in Prince George, you decided to get a little political yourself. You were, and still are, the riding president for PG North. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was actually the first time that I became political was in 1983. So a fellow by the name of Dennis Jackson, then I think it was the Socrates at that point,
Right.
invited me to a meeting of their riding association, and I said, okay. So I went to the meeting, and before you know it, they said, well, we need to elect a president, and John, why don't you put your finger up? And I did, and there was nobody else, and I was the riding president. So, I've
Uh,
always been somewhat political interested, not necessarily overly active in a particular direction. I'm
right.
more than anything a middle of the road. So in any event, so I was involved in that, and then the next time, obviously, I became involved in 2001, the election of the BC Liberals,
Right.
and I ran against my dear friend Shirley Bond in
Right.
the Prince George Vermont riding, and Shirley won, and I believe she has been a great MLA, and I should quickly also mention that obviously our thoughts are with her when her husband passed away last week. So, but
Shirley's
she,
one of my
yeah,
favorite people too. I mean, I don't
yeah.
think there's many more harder working people on the political side of things. It doesn't matter what the event is. It
No,
doesn't matter what the cause is. Shirley is always there, lending her voice and making sure that it gets extra
I
time.
agree with
So
that 100%.
yeah,
Yeah, and then I also was the writing president for coming back to Prince George Mackenzie writing. Was Pat Bell.
right.
I was his writing president as well, until he got elected. So yeah, always been involved. I've always been interested, and still I am active in terms of not so much actively in a particular writing, left, right, or NDP or BC Liberals, but more being interested. I get along with most politicians,
Mhm.
and then obviously I love British Columbia, and I love what happens in British Columbia, and I try to be as proactive in that as I can. The same as the city and the region.
You definitely have. That's actually where I was going to go next. You were one of the early voices for having a freestanding university in northern BC, and one of the guys that really pushed for UNBC when that fired up as well. Why was it so important for you to make sure that this region had some affordable higher education?
Well, the simple reason is that because this is the other half of the province, most of the GDP, 80% of the GDP is generated in northern British Columbia. And then the other part is Prince George is the natural center, not only the spruce capital of the north, but also the center of northern British Columbia as a city, road, air, and all the other ones. So, to have a university, in particular a freestanding university, was very important. At the time that the issues of that came to the foreground and where we became collectively more vocal about it, is I was a writing president of Prince George North, and it allowed me to be very active in the background, with then the so-called government. And but there was a battle, because anytime you're trying to get a project like that, it takes a lot of organization and a lot of people,
Yeah.
and a lot of people were very, very active about it in the back rooms between the politicians. In particular, we had an AGM in Penticton that particular year, just before the announcement was made, and we went down with a massive group of people in Prince George. We had buttons, and we walked through the place, and with all the people around us with signs, and this must happen.
Yeah.
And so to make it, in particular, a freestanding university was critical for us,
Mhm.
because it then allowed us to grow as the Northern University, which is now known as one of the best, if not the best, universities, small universities in Canada.
And
So
there
it
was
changed the Prince George.
Yeah, there were so many side effects
Okay.
to that too. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the forestry industry would go through a tough time in a year, and Prince George as a city would feel it. You would notice it. There was places shutting down. People
Oh,
didn't
yeah, we
have
would
money.
go up and down
The
for sure.
university
No
came
doubt.
in, and it seemed to really give us some more lanes out there. And now when forestry dips, we have so many other industries that can keep things going. And I really credit the university with kind of being the kickstart for that. So did you see that
No,
as that was going to come? Did you know that was going to come?
absolutely. That was the catalyst to stimulate other investment, bring other people here that could say it's not a place to have a job, but I can raise a family there. There is a university, very, very good college, and all the infrastructure for that is here in the region.
It's
In
amazing.
fact, Matt, and we are now working on another major project, which is still somewhat in its infancy. We want to create, to the College of New Caledonia, a center of excellence for developing skill sets, product development, all of that around the College of New Caledonia. We've been very involved in the Trade Center, the
Yes.
College Trade Center, about 20, 25 years ago, where we were fortunate enough to be able to acquire the then Canadian Tire
That's
building,
right.
and but we have to go now beyond that, because especially at the time that we are in, where the industry is evolving, it's getting smaller. But at the same time, although it kind of looks like, the industry is, it's is in the limelight, or in the negative way a lot of times, and correctly so. A lot of people have lost their jobs, but there are opportunities that are immense. We now must look at taking a smaller forest because of beetle kill and all the other ones,
Yeah.
and look at further manufacturing as one direction for the industry to go. Fortunately, we have a workforce where the skill sets are not the same as that we will have in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And we must develop as the center of excellence. And we have support from the college. Dennis Johnson has been quite involved with me in particular. Canfor is involved too. So it's just coming off the ground now. It would be the BCIT of the North, and it would deal with new practices of manufacturing, not only in the forest industry, but other industries as well, but with the focus on the forest industry, of introducing robotics, other development technique, new products for new markets, and including accessing the working forest base and saying how can we grow more cubic meters per hectare. There is no other country in the world
Right.
that can grow forest better than we can here in British Columbia. And our working forest is amazing in terms of location, but now we have to, rather than focusing on, obviously it's terrible what is happening in some of these communities, but we now have to look forward and say, what can we do to again grow the forest faster, develop new techniques, entrepreneurship, and the key to that is how do we develop the skill sets so that we can become again the spruce capital of the North, but not only the North, but in the world, where people will come from far and wide to look at what we're doing, how we are doing it, how we, manage our forest land base, and all of that. We are on the beginning of that. I predict to you that within 5 years we are planning and we will start building a center of excellence for Northern British Columbia.
That's amazing. We definitely
And
need that as well. In Prince George. Awesome. Awesome. Now, you put $1 million towards that John A. Brink Center over there in the old Canadian Tire. What is going on in that building right now? What type of classes are happening at this moment?
the donation that I made, Matt, respectfully, was towards the Center of Excellence.
Right.
And I made it at the trade center that 20 years before we had donated to. But the $1 million was for developing a center of excellence.
Okay.
Attached to the College of New Caledonia. So what is happening in the trade center? They're doing a fabulous job there in the trade center. I urge everybody that has an opportunity to take a tour through that. And but we need that, but then we need more. The new president of the College of New Caledonia, Dr. Dennis Johnson, is a unique individual that started here 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Time goes so quick. Has a background, came out of the Okanagan, Vernon region, has a background in the lumber industry as well, and then also managed a college on the prairies that was similar with all the satellite colleges like we have here in
Right.
Prince George. So we are poised with the team that is in place to go further than that. And I believe industry will come on side. I believe the federal government will come on side, should come on side, and so does the provincial government, because we now have to go from a period of negative we lost because of pandemics, both beetle and spruce, as well as fires that are annual albuquerque has gone to nearly half of the highest that we have been at, and then look forward and saying, okay, that then being said, what can we do to look forward and create an industry that again will revive as it was before, but far beyond that. And a good example of that really is that if anybody has had an opportunity to look around, the Bowrun in 1983 was the biggest clear cut in the world, they said a lot of times. You could see it from the satellites.
Right.
If you go to the Bowrun region, I don't know if you have gone there, but every time I go there, I cannot believe what has happened to the forest there, how quickly it is coming back. The other one is always a very, very interesting one to see is the ancient forest east of Prince George.
Yep.
And then the other one is the Jim Goods, the Good Sir Nature Park,
Right.
just north of Prince George.
Yep.
An amazing places you must see.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even get up by UNBC there too, the Forest for the World trails. I take all of my family that comes from out of town up there, and it just blows their mind every time that something like that is in the middle of our city. So we definitely are in a great area. I did want to talk to you a little bit about another Prince George giant that I have a lot of respect for. I wouldn't have had a radio career. I wouldn't have had the radio career I did without him. That's Ben Meisner. Absolute giant in this in northern BC during his talk show days, and then of course in the later years with Opinion 250 with Elaine, with his wife. I know you and Ben had many projects that you kind of took aim at on the radio there. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Mr. Meisner here in PG.
Now, Ben was a special character, no question about it. I always remember his, that he had the studio then, CKPG, and they had this old couch sitting there, and the kind of, that was before Patterson bought it, I guess. But in any event, Ben Kinder was a character to quite a character. Did excellent job on interviewing, hard hitter. He loved that, and but at the same time, an amazing guy in the history of Prince George in terms of what he did, the things that he pursued, in particular Alcan and the Nechako rivers, and all of those issues. If he saw an issue that was adversely affecting the region of Prince George, he was the guy that would chase it and was not shy. And he was able to connect in terms of picked up the phone and invited people to do an interview, and he could virtually get anybody that he wanted to get. And then, fasten your seatbelts because God only knows what's going to happen next.
That was my favorite part about Ben. He was such a hard hitter, and that's what a lot of people remember about him. But there's a story I like to tell about Ben that I think kind of shows his other side too. I was, in my early days in radio, I was picking up as many hours as I could as a receptionist for CKPG. So I'd sit at the desk, I'd answer phones, I'd do mail, whatever I needed to do. One of my jobs was to make sure that Ben was safe, because when Ben was on the air, you'd always have some crazies running through the door that wanted to go and punch him because he said something they didn't like. So one day this guy came in. I don't know if he was homeless, but he definitely was down on life a little bit. Rambling and ranting like you wouldn't believe. And I thought, oh my God, I got to get this guy out of here. Ben had just finished his show, so he came out of the studio over here and he was walking down the hallway, and I had the door closed and I was waving him off. But he didn't listen to me. He came through the door anyway, and he said, what's going on? And I said, oh, well, this guy wants to talk to you, but we'll get rid of him. He says, no, I'll deal with him. And he took the guy into the back while he was photocopying his show papers for the day. And the guy ranted like you wouldn't believe about how the government was watching him and they're going to steal his things. And Ben talked to him for about 15 minutes. And by the time he was done, it turned out that his government checks weren't coming through. And he didn't have anybody to speak for him at a bank or anything. And he kept getting thrown out the door. So he wasn't getting his money, and the dude was starving. Ben, after 15 minutes of listening to him rant and rave, realized what was going on. He made a phone call right there in the front office, and he got this guy his check. And when that guy left, I said, sorry, Ben, that's my bad. I shouldn't have let him in. And he turned and he stopped and he paused for a sec and he said, listen, Matt, I'm going to tell you something right now. He said, you always need to listen to the crazy because there's a little bit of truth in the crazy and they deserve your respect as well. And it was a mind-blowing moment for me where this massive voice in Prince George, which, like you said, could talk to anybody he wants to about any topic at any time, took 15 minutes out of his day to listen to the crazy that actually had a problem that I would have completely dismissed in that moment. He was a giant, but at the same time, one of the most human people I've ever met.
No question about that.
Yeah, you know, one of the reasons I actually started this podcast, I think Ben Meisner needs to be honored in this city. I think we need to do something for him, whether it's naming a park or naming something that's attached to Ben in some way, shape, or form. Because I don't think many people in this city today realize what he did for Northern BC. Yeah,
no, I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Now, the road hasn't always been easy. Let's get back to your story. One of the issues that you tackled in your days in forestry was glue. Now, with finger jointing, you're using a lot of glue to make this lumber. The industry came at you and said, well, the glue that you're using is not good for the environment. So you went out and you invented a brand new environmentally friendly glue. How does a forestry icon become a glue inventor? I don't understand the steps to make that happen.
You see, one of the things that happens sometimes, Matt, if you develop a product that is very successful, then then there are always people that is a certain product that you may be replacing, and then to potentially attack the credibility of your product that you're manufacturing is maybe one way, and to gain market share for you versus the other party. So in my particular case, actually, we are manufacturing studs. Studs are vertical pressure, so the rather than structural lengthwise. And then a lot of people in the gluing used phenyl resorcinols or urea formaldehyde. I've always been very sensitive to the environment, and we wanted to use the most friendly, adhesives that we could, and PVAs that we are using, polyvinyl acetate, is virtually no different than what you are buying in the hardware store. It's the white glues,
right,
with a few elements added to it, and but it is environmentally very, very friendly. And it was already used in certain applications like that.
Right.
And so when it became a question about it, so we did, which is normally not done, we did extensive testing ourselves in an approved facility that showed that the product was not only equal to, it was much better than what was suggested. People normally don't do that. And then, with working with our glue provider, we added a number of elements, again, very closely studied, and to the product, and it is widely used now. And it is one of the other things that, it's a way of how you approach issues or problems.
Right. Right.
Obviously, that to me, it's always, if something needs change, or if I need to accomplish a certain goal, that if I can't get in through the front door, I go through the back door. If I can't get there, I go to the window. And if that doesn't work, I go to the chimney. And
Right.
there are always finding solutions to problems is my life, so.
Right. You find that fun. Fixing problems is a fun thing for you.
Except when the bank calls and says, it's not working for us.
So. Okay. Now, there's another big battle that you got involved in that almost took your company. That was in the late 80s. There was a problem with the lumber grading rules in Canada. What was going on, and how did that hurt you? And why did you decide to go after this and fix the problem?
So actually, what happened, Matt, is that here in Prince George, we had issues with the quality of lumber coming in, and so at that point, the Council of Forest Industry was the grading agency that was involved, and so the further I looked into the problem, lumber is my life. That's what I've done my whole life, right from the time I was a kid. And obviously here in Canada, I'm a lumber grader. I was the founding president of the BC Council of Value Added Wood Processors. I was the founding chair of the Woodworks Initiative. I'm the vice chair now of the Council of Forest Industry in British Columbia.
Right.
So I've always been very, very involved in the organization. So there, through pure coincidence, that if you use lumber in structures, may that be your house, may it be another structure, then the lumber that you use has been fairly carefully selected in terms of defects that are allowed that do not impair the integrity of the structure.
Mm.
And those grading rules are decided throughout North America. There is one set of grading rules that are the grading rules that are being applied by everybody.
Right.
So the thing that happened on, I believe it was August the 5th, 1986 at 10 o'clock in the morning, talking to an inspector, he told me that there were, in fact, two sets of grading rules. The one official one, and then the other one far less restrictive than this, which was confidential and secret.
Oh.
So I thought that was wrong, and I was deputy chair of the quality control committee then. I went to the inspector and said, tell me everything about this second set of grading rules. He told me, close the door, it's a real problem, it's getting out of hand, it's going to blow up, and it's going to be a major, major issue. So by the time, then I thought that all my peers in the industry would agree. I thought it was a local regional problem.
Right.
And I thought all my peers would agree with me. Unfortunately, they thought that I became a problem because it was very profitable to use the other rules. And they thought the best solution would be is shoot the messenger. So, and it will be in my book that I write as well. So at the end, it was not just a local problem, it was not a regional problem, it was not a BC problem, it was not a Canadian problem, it was a North American problem. It was a practice from Florida to California, from Labrador to Alaska.
Wow.
And it was a multi-billion-dollar fraud. And it cost me virtually everything, but 60 days in Supreme Court. After it was all over, I had nothing left, and I had to start from the beginning. But I changed the system forever in Canada. Why did I pursue it? Not because of money. The reason that I pursued it because I thought it would irreparably change our brand collectively of the industry. Unfortunately, at that point, the industry didn't see it that way. But after it was all over, I believe by the time that it was 10 years later, I initially discovered it in 86. By the time 96, I said to my wife, I think I'm going to survive. And I lost everything that I had in the process. But I won in terms of that we changed the system, that the now is one system in all of North America. And it was changed because of that.
Unbelievable. Well, man, great job on that one too. It's not easy being the guy that wants to be truthful and the guy that wants to do the right thing, especially when there's a lot of dollars involved. We've seen that a ton, especially in the past decade here. But props to you for attacking it, what was definitely a serious problem, and turning it around and making it, work again. You are doing some big things here in the community. You can tell that you love Prince George because every time I turn around, you're supporting another event, another charity. I got 2 pages of events and charities here that Scott sent me before we got down here, and you're very passionate about them too. Let's talk about the Prince George Equine and Animal Rescue because I know you and Nicola have been doing some amazing stuff over there. You were a big fan of horses when you were a kid, I'm guessing, over in Holland.
Yeah, in particular, not only horses but all animals, right? Really is my passion. But in particular, horses. I grew up around that. My sisters rode horses in Holland. My wife Sharon and myself, we have 10 horses on the island, and we both ride English dressage. But that is a passion. And with Nicola and Grant. Was actually my wife that gave us the idea. It was then called the Equine Rescue,
Right.
And so we went down there to look and to meet them. I could not believe the commitment that Nicola and her husband Grant were making by themselves. Amazing. There were not only horses, there were sheep, there were lambs, there were anything that either had been not just surrendered, but that were in trouble someplace that they rescued. And in particular, there was one horse. They call them now Tick because he had thousands of ticks on his body. He probably was this far away from dying.
Yeah.
So he brought him back, and actually in my book, they'll have pictures of him. He now is a horse that is being cared for by somebody else and is doing great. But so what they were doing is amazing and all by themselves. So so that I said, no, we're going to have to do something. So we made a donation to them of $50,000, and for the next 5 years we would supply them with lumber and money.
Wow.
And so that is one, but there's many others.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on a few of them. Canadian Cancer Society Relay for Life, that's been a favorite for you and for the crew. It's a big one here in Prince George, too. The Canadian Red Cross, the Hospice Society, it's an important one to so many people, as we've all used that service, or many people have at some point. Schizophrenia Society, the Autism Society of Northern BC, Boogie with the Stars, Judy Russell's Productions as well. And then you do a lot of teams and athletes too. The Prince George Cougars, you've got a lot of individual athletes in town too. Why is it important to support those types of people?
And the reason is very simple, one actually, because amazingly, Matt, is that we have so many people that have excelled at levels that are not only regional, provincial in Canada, but worldwide are recognized that we really don't know much about in town. So we usually try to find those unique individuals that have this absolute specialty, and we bring them through our social media. We are very active in that, as you know, and we support them financially, and then at the same time we showcase them. And and so we have kind of an athlete of the month that we donate $500 to, and at the same time showcase them, and they then become part of our team.
Right.
So, and we have done that for quite a while already. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool little thing that you guys have put together, and it's really tough when you're an artist, when you're an athlete, because there's not a lot of dollars there. There never is. Even when you become a pro and you're the biggest of the best and you're going to the Olympics, you're still paying to be there. So it's important to have sponsorships of people like you that understand what it takes to get to those things. So props on that as well. Here in the Prince George area, just getting kind of close to the end of my questions, actually, but here in Prince George, over the next probably 2 to 4 years, we're going to be looking at a new mayor, and our council is really starting to turn over here. We got a lot of new faces in there right now. Are there any faces you see on council right now that you like for a possible new mayor in the next few years?
I don't know. Has he announced that he's going to retire? I hope not, because
he hasn't announced it.
Terrific job.
Yeah, he hasn't announced it yet, but I just looking at it logistically, I see maybe one more term for somebody like Lynn, and I don't know if he's going to go much further than that. So, it just with the up and comers, you normally see someone in council for at least a term or two before we push them over to the mayor's side. Just wondering if you see anybody over there that might have the talents to take Prince George to the next level in the next few years here.
The next 5 years is going to be critical in Prince George with all the things that are happening going forward. And I believe that the current council under the leadership of Lynn Hall have done very, very well. One of the most impressive councils that I've seen over the years. Right. And, and if I look around the table, there are a number of candidates that I believe certainly would have the ability to step into that position. I wouldn't name anybody in particular, but I know all of them. And and I think as a group they have done excellent, and I believe that leaving something behind, even if Lynn decided to step down, because I would hope he doesn't yet, but then we would have no problems finding one already in the lineup.
My only question, I guess, with City Hall right now, it seems like maybe we have a problem with city management. You look at some of the new projects that are going on out there right now. The Prince George Fire Hall is the latest one that has people up in arms a little bit. They put forward the plan for that thing at $15 million. And then a week ago, we found out that our city management decided to change that building plan and add an extra 5,000 square feet on it, giving us an extra $2 million on top of it. Do you think that one of the things that council has to do over the next couple of years is possibly fix problems like that, or is it just maybe a communication issue that we have to fix here so that we don't have this miscommunication happening on stuff like this?
Yeah, I was not aware of that actually, but I always believe no matter what it is, if it is a city, if it is the country, or if it is the province, if you budget a project, no matter what size it is, then you have to be on target, and I would be very strict about that. And if you then make an adjustment that is sizable, then you have to be able to justify it and go back to the process. And so I believe having an idea about cost that is expenditures that are going to be borne by others, then you have to make sure that everybody's in the loop.
Yeah, and that just seems to be the ongoing issue. We saw that culvert going $2 million over just a couple of years back. We've seen a couple other projects going over by 30%. So it just seems like maybe council needs to get some management together that can budget a little better. But great to have your thoughts on that as well. So let's wrap this thing up here today. What is next for John Brink? You're 79 years old, is that right?
I'm 79. I'm going to be 80 November the 1st.
80 November the 1st. Obviously not retirement. So what is the next big thing that you're going to be jumping into?
At Brink, we have a mandatory retirement age, so I'm going to be very conscientious of that. Now, your job is, Matt, to ask me, what age is that?
Exactly. I was going to say, what is it, 110? Like, what's the age going to be?
90.
90. Oh, okay. We got 10 more years. Good.
So with your question, obviously, thanks for the time being on your show, obviously. But, looking forward, I believe our company will double in size in the next 5 years, if not sooner. I'm excited about looking forward. I believe the forest industry in the province has huge potential. I'm excited about the Center of Excellence because that's one of the building blocks underneath it for all of us. That is important. The time to do that is now. The other thing that I'm doing, I'm writing a book. The book is virtually finished. That will come out September the 1st. The title of the book will be Attitude, Passion, Work Ethics. That will kind of talk about what motivates somebody to come from one side of the earth to go to the other side from nothing and do all that sort of thing. And, so the other thing about the book, and you will find this may be interesting, the price of the book will be $25.47.
I like it.
And we hope that, the other thing that we will do with the book is that hopefully the cost of the book will be no more than $10, and we will donate the profits of the book to animal welfare.
Well, when you're done with that book, I would love to read it, and then we should have you back on the show again and do another chat about the book launch as well.
I like that. And the other thing, Matt, if I may quickly, is that we're starting our podcast, I believe, as early as the first week of July.
Awesome.
We're setting up our studio right now, and obviously having had the opportunity to be on yours, that's good. And we'll see each other again, maybe in this kind of a setting.
For sure. Let me know when it's up and around, and I will definitely help toss that link around and make sure that people know that it's going on too. I actually forgot to ask you one thing that I wanted to dive into. Hemp. Hemp is now legal. It looks like the industry is going to start blowing up here a little bit. Do you see the hemp industry as competition, or is this an industry that maybe you can amalgamate into what you're doing with Brink Group of Companies?
All of that. I believe it's good. It has great potential, something that we are watching, and anything like that, where we can add further value, and I think there are huge opportunities in all kinds of directions, hemp being one of them. But the other one that you will see is that if you just allow me to just kind of go forward, is that in my mind is where I see a forest that is tended very closely, at least twice, to bring it to the free to grow. I see machines operating in the forest that are GPS controlled, that do it on their own, that map every tree that is there, manage the life of the tree to early harvesting there. Rather than a tree having 80 years to grow, it would be probably closer to 50, 60. All of that is possible here. And then making products that we have never imagined. Can you imagine, like a guy like myself starting with $25, I brought an idea of finger jointing that was never used here, and it turned into an industry. Yeah. All of that happened in Prince George. I'm not saying that's the example, but there are many, many, many other opportunities. That's why we need a center of excellence. That's why we need it in Prince George, the spruce capital of the world, the best community in all of British Columbia, if not Canada.
Absolutely. And that'll strengthen the industry and hopefully get some people back to work that are currently struggling on that side of things too. John, I want to say thank you very much. That is an hour and 10 minutes. You're officially the longest podcast that I've thrown down so far, and we covered a ton of stuff in there. So thank you very much. That's an amazing story, and keep doing what you're doing. I can't wait to chat with you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Man. Thanks a ton. Have a great one.
Okay.